Hey guys, John here, and welcome back to the Synthmaster 3 tutorial course. Today we're going to be discussing the VAnalog Oscillator. So let's start off as always with a fresh preset. So let's right click up here, go to init preset, and we're going to load this by going to the gear icon here in the oscillator section, and then scrolling down to replace with, and then down here at the bottom, let's go ahead and select this guy. Now, most of the controls here are going to be familiar now because we've discussed them earlier on in the course. So things like the volume, the panning, free and sync, and so on. So today we're going to discuss the specific controls and features of this oscillator. So the first thing that you're going to notice is that we have a different waveform displayed here. And on the right hand side, we have buttons like 1, 2, and S. Now the way this oscillator works is that we have an initial waveform, which is going to be this 1. Then we have a final waveform, which is going to be this 2. And then we have a sub waveform, which is going to be this S over here. So let's go ahead and play a couple notes. Now we might notice that we aren't actually hearing this triangle wave. This shape right over here sounds more like a saw wave. And we can see that it's a saw wave as well. Now this is due to the symmetry parameter, which by default is going to be to the left. Now if we double click this, we have our triangle shape. Now this parameter here is really interesting to modulate. You're going to get some really cool results from that. So the knob to the right of the symmetry knob is going to be called Morph X, and then if we click this here, we have Morph Y. Now for these to make sense, let's go to the second button here, or the final waveform, and let's make some adjustments here. So maybe let's bring this all the way to the left. Let's give a curve here, maybe bring this down, something kind of like that. And we still have our triangle wave because that here is the initial waveform, right? So now let's say we get this Morph X and we start changing this value. We can see that this is now morphing to match this waveform here. However, it's not exact. It's moving these positions here. If we go over to Morph Y and then now we start to morph this, we can see that now it's morphing the curves. So if we wanted to modulate these both at the same time, we could use something like a macro, or we can use something like the mod wheel. So if we went back to Morph X, let's bring this all the way down, we can grab the mod wheel, drag and drop this here, and then we switch this out to Morph Y and do the same thing, drag and drop this here. And then now once we start using our mod wheel, we can see that now it's morphing this exactly correctly. And the cool part is that it's incredibly smooth. So let's do this really slow and you're going to notice that you don't hear any stepping. It's insanely smooth. So let's take a listen to that again. And let's check this out on a higher note. So this thing exactly right here is part of the charm of this oscillator. Also, something to know about as well is that underneath this gear icon, we can change the curve time. We can also reset the waveform, copy it, save it, so on and so forth. So under the curve, let's go to the second order step and take a listen to that as well. And on a lower note. Incredibly smooth. So let's set this back to the first here. And something we also need to talk about is aliasing. So if we navigate here to the bottom left of our synth where it says settings, and under the audio engine, we can see that the engine quality, I have set this here to draft. Now, if I brought this quality here down to low, let me play some higher notes, some kind of... There's times where we can notice some aliasing here, so if this is something that you notice as well, you can always change this engine quality to best, for example. Also, you can go up here to the oscillator itself under the quality. So we have low, which is going to be the normal sampling rate, and then we can go to normal, which is going to be 2 times oversampling, high is going to be 3 times oversampling, and then best is going to be 4 times oversampling. So if you have this on best, it's going to be obviously the best quality in tandem with your audio engine as well. So even just this note, let's take a listen to this here. So this is on best on both quality. Now if we drop this back down here to low and then go to the settings and bring this back down to draft. We can see stuff down over here. And then we go back to best and then bring this also back to best. and it's incredibly clean after that. So that's something to keep in mind in case you ever hear any aliasing going on. So starting here from a fresh preset with the VAnalog Oscillator loaded up, let's talk about the sub. So that's this S down over here at the bottom, and then we can see that this is going to be the shape of our sub. And let's double click the symmetry real quick. Now if we play a note here, that's just our regular oscillator. We haven't yet introduced our sub to the mix. So what we have to do is under here on the volume, let's click this here and go down to sub, and let's start increasing this knob right over here. So now we hear another oscillator getting added into the mix, or another waveform. Now something to keep in mind is that when we introduce this sub, this isn't automatically pitched down one octave for us. So what we have to do is let's click this pitch here, let's go to sub, and then here now we can start changing the sub itself. And we can see it in the oscilloscope as well, whereas only the sub is getting targeted via the pitch parameter, whereas our main waveforms are not. And we can double click this. If we want to go a fast octave down, we can right click this here, and then we can go to maybe enter a value by typing, and then maybe we can go to -12, something like that. And then we have our sub oscillator there. Also keep in mind that under the symmetry option here, we click this menu again, and we can also target this sub as well. And we can see the update in the oscilloscope too. So we can kind of make a pulse wave with our sub just by turning this knob here. Or if we want to, we can just draw the shape here just however we like to. Really depends on how you want to do it, but the idea is that to target the sub, we have a lot of these sub menus to actually go through and target to then change things with the sub. So since we're already familiar with the drift parameters by now, we can also apply this concept to the symmetry, the morph X, and the morph Y. So from a fresh preset with the VAnalog Oscillator loaded, let's kind of walk through that a little bit here. So let's double click the symmetry for now, and then let's do the same thing with our mod wheel. Let's map that to morph X, and let's go to morph Y, and then map this as well. And then for the second waveform here, let's do something similar. Bring this to the left, maybe bring this curve down, maybe this curve down as well, something like that, move this guy around. Something just kind of interesting like that. So now once we play a note here and kind of move with our mod wheel, it's morphing between 1 and 2 as we were doing before. Now, as we saw with drift here, we can target the pitch. So let's bring this up here, and let's bring the speed pretty fast so we can kind of see more of what's going on. We can kind of see that wiggling there. We can move the mod wheel. Now, if we bring this back down here on the pitch, we can click this menu here, and let's say we want to target the symmetry, so this over here, and bring this up all the way, and we can start to see that moving. Okay, let's bring this back down, and also, like I was mentioning before, we can do this with the X morph and the Y morph as well. And let's bring the X morph down, and let's go to the Y morph as well. And let's do them together. And like I mentioned before, doing this kind of thing is extremely smooth. So if you ever kind of want to fade into different types of waveforms like this 1 and 2, definitely check out this oscillator for that. So when the time comes that we want to add more voices to our oscillator, we can navigate to the voices menu here at the top. Now we can select this menu, and again, we can pick as many as we want, up to 16. Now I want you to be aware that once we're in this oscillator mode and we start adding voices, down here in the voices tab, we have some extra options available to us. So we've been over the other ones with the mix and the pan and the detuning and so on and so forth. But for this oscillator, we have symmetry, we have X morph, we have Y morph. So the same controls that we were just going over, we now have those available on a voice basis. So something to keep in mind, and perhaps something to modulate. So overall, this is a great sounding oscillator, and I mentioned a couple times already how smooth it is once we're morphing between these different waveforms. So I highly recommend to spend some time with it, add some modulations to the morphing and the symmetry parameters, and you're going to come up with some pretty interesting results. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next one.